Evidently, when I got up there, they didn't want to keep playing the music. It's kind of my way of getting around, just turning this on here. All right. Well, hey, big shout out to Harvest Food Project, man. You guys are amazing. And I'm so excited and looking forward to Much Love movements. I think as a church and as even a greater church across the world, people are less interested in hearing about the love of Jesus and more interested in seeing the love of Jesus. And I think that we can do that by partnering with Harvest Food Project and literally feeding people that are in need and that are worried about, hey, am I going to get the next meal, or can I afford healthy food? Or, there's all kinds of issues around that. So looking forward to the Much Love movements, November 11th, so that's next Sunday, and November 17th. You guys make sure and get signed up and come hang with us. Again, I don't need that from you, but I want that for you in terms of just love on people and live out our mission. So, evidently lately it is wedding season, because I have been asked to officiate a ton of weddings in the recent weeks. And so I got to do a wedding this weekend. It was awesome. I started thinking about our service this week and the idea of having on different specs, different glasses, different perspective of moments. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm in the middle of a moment with a ton of different perspectives. There's this great couple getting married. I know both of them, and I've got history with one of them big time, and then the other one kind of got some good history. So it was so funny. I looked out on the audience and I was like, wow, I think I see some X's in the room. And when you're at a wedding and there's X's in the room, it's kind of like, oh, that's interesting. What is their perspective of this moment? And then you see moms and dads in the room, not a ton of moms and dads, but a mom and a dad on both sides. And, sometimes the perspective of mom and dad is, oh, my sweet little girl, she's getting married. What are we going to do? And on the other side, usually around the guy's side, it's like, man, I'm so glad that this kid is finally leaving. Like, get out of the house. So that's a different perspective. And then you see, best friends are usually in weddings. And I always think that's an interesting perspective, because if I'm a best friend and that means I've hung out with you a lot, well, now you kind of got a new best friend. And so what happens to me, and how does our relationship evolve? That's an interesting perspective. Then you have old friends. These people had friends from all over. And I thought, wow, I wonder what their perspective is. It's like they probably haven't seen these people for a long time. And, you're kind of like, oh, that's exactly who I thought you would marry. Or, wow, I never would have guessed it. There's just all kinds of perspectives at this wedding. None better or none more near and dear to my heart than a little boy who was sitting about back there. And he literally, as I was about to say, and now you may kiss your bride, okay? This little kid yells out, oh no, are they about to kiss? And then they kiss, and he goes, oh, that's so gross. And so great perspective, and it reminded me of when we read the Bible. I think some of us look at it and go, oh no! And some of us are repelled by it. Some of us think those stories are so old, they're so irrelevant, and that couldn't have happened. And then others of us maybe have been reading the Bible for a long time, and we look at a story and go, man, I've heard that story 1,000 times. So regardless of where you're at in the listening to stories in the Bible moment, I'm asking us, and I've been asking this over the last several weeks, just to put on a new pair of glasses and look at a story with me. And just be willing, all of us, if we'd just be willing to maybe learn something new from a fresh perspective, from a fresh angle. So, before we dive in, though, I would like to give us a moment to live out this historic mission to love like Jesus over and over again. And it's not actually very hard. You can do it pretty simply. Just smile at your neighbor, all right? hug, handshake, high five. Or if you're a super introvert like me, you might just text somebody that you're grateful for them. All right, take 5 seconds, hug, handshake, high five, do what you do.
Hi guys, how are you? Good. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. How's it going? Nice to meet you.
And if you're watching on Facebook Live, you too can share some love. So text somebody or hug somebody in your room or in your car, wherever you're listening on Facebook. All right. Well, obviously, if you are new with us today, we just want to say welcome and thank you for trusting us with your time. We hope to use it and steward it really well. And we certainly love you and would love to get to know you. So give us a shout out on that connection card. If you are watching online across the Metroplex or across the country or even across the world, we welcome you too. It's an honor to have each of you here, and including our guests. It's great to have you. So I do want to take a quick poll, just to poll the people in the room. How many of you have ever heard a Bible story about a guy? So I'm going to tell you a guy named Jonah and a whale. Anybody ever heard of? Wow, I mean that's like 90% of the room, maybe 80% of the room, if you're watching on Facebook, has seen it. If you're on Facebook and you're driving, don't hold your hand up. But otherwise, a lot of us have probably heard a story about Jonah and a whale. Spoiler alert. If you go back to the original text, there is no whale. There is a fish. I'm not going to take your fish from you. And, all your childhood memories of Jonah. But there is no whale. There is, though, a backstory that's very intriguing. And I'll take you back to, so again, we're in 2018. Now we got to go back for a second. You got to get context to know why the situation is important. So let me give you some context behind the text. Here it is. There's 1st and 2nd Kings in the Bible. It's books in the Bible. 1st and 2nd Kings talks about the kings that ruled in that era. Okay? Now, in 2nd Kings, it talks about specific kings from Assyria. And I'll try to pronounce their names, but they obviously didn't grow up in my part of the world because they have very interesting names that I wish I knew how to say because I'm doing them a disservice. But here we go. Then Pul, king of Assyria, invaded the land. That's what I need you to remember. He invaded. Another king named Tiglath-Pileser, I don't know how to say it, sorry. King of Assyria came and deported the people. So we have an invader and a deporter. And then this other guy's name is like 8 syllables, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and laid siege to it. So you have 3 kings in Assyria. They all have, here's what they do. They invade. If you invade, back in that day, that means you raise an army, you march in, and by violence and force, you take over. Second guy, deported people. What happens when you deport people? You capture their inhabitants, you remove them from their homes, from their jobs, from their land, from their community, and you displace them to another place far away. If you lay siege to a city, what is that? That means you surround the city with your armies, and you prevent food and water from going in. So what does a community do if that happens? Well, you starve, you suffer, and then you surrender. So the Assyrian kings, the Assyrians themselves, are these super shady, super brash, super mean, super oppressive people. That's who we're talking about. That's the era that we're talking about in history. And here's where a story emerges in culture. Now, remember, the Bible was not written back then. It wasn't like they were reading the story. No. This story emerges orally throughout the land of a guy named Jonah. Jonah is an Israelite. The Israelites had been ruled and oppressed and hated by the Assyrians year after year after year. So they've been feeling it from Assyria. Jonah picks up at this point. That's when his story starts to emerge. And God, Jonah's God, which is the same God in 2018 I would say that I follow, Jonah's God says to Jonah, Jonah, I want you to take a message, a warning to the great city of Nineveh and tell them they got like 40 days. and then I'm wiping them out. Now, Jonah, in response, right? So he tells him to go to Nineveh. Nineveh is as far east as an Israelite would ever travel. So go east, go as far east, get to Nineveh and tell them the warning. Jonah, in his response, because of course Nineveh is full of Assyrians. It is in Assyria. It is kind of like a capital city type place. So you have all these Assyrians, and you have this one Israelite who's just going to march in and tell them God is out for them. Jonah's response, chapter 1, verse 3 of Jonah's story. Here we go. In hearing those instructions, Jonah got up and ran toward Tarshish. Anyone want to guess where Tarshish is? As far west as you could possibly go as an Israelite. So Israelites would think Tarshish is the other end of the world, west, and Nineveh is the other end of the world, east. In hearing those instructions, Jonah got up and ran toward Tarshish, and he said to God, God, I'm sorry, not sorry. I'm sorry, not sorry. Being so bad got me feeling so good. Has nobody ever heard Demi Lovato? That's unbelievable. Anyways, here we go. He didn't really say that. I'm joking. That was kind of funny. All right, so at least in my head. So here we go. He wants you to go into the center of the beast and tell the beast he's a bad beast. And he goes, no, thank you. I'm headed to Tarshish. And the story begins to, the plot clots, right? So he jumps on this boat. The boat starts getting every bad thing that can happen to these sailors, and this boat is happening. And the sailors of all people in this story, Jonah, the guy who says he follows God, flees. The sailors who don't say they follow God, they don't even believe in God, they start to pray. And as they pray, they figure out, hey, I think it's Jonah. I think he's the problem. And in fact, we feel very good about just throwing him overboard, if that's okay. And Jonah's like, yeah, I am the problem, just throw me overboard. So, throws him overboard. And this is where that whale, that big fish, comes into play, swallows Jonah. 3 days inside the fish motel. And you're after 3 days in the fish motel, you're kind of like, all right, I give. So Jonah gives, and he says, I'll go to Nineveh, and I'll tell him what you told me to tell him. He goes to Nineveh, full of Assyrians. It takes 3 days to walk from one side of Assyria to the next side. It is a big city. And he tells them, he starts just saying it. Hey, this is what God has said. And literally everybody in Nineveh, all the Assyrians, shockingly go, oh my goodness, we need to turn. We need to change our ways. Now, Jonah is flabbergasted because he's like, I can't believe this is happening. It gets so big and the city is so into what God is saying that the king finds out. And the king says this in Jonah 3, verse 7. By the decree of the king and the nobles, do not let people or animals, herds or flocks taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink. But let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn his fierce anger so that we will not perish. Okay, I don't want you to miss this right here, this little sentence. Let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. That's odd because sackcloth was what you wore when you were crying out to God. You had noticed your own sin, you had noticed your own brokenness, and you were asking God for mercy. How many animals do you know have cried out for mercy and wearing sackcloth lately? Nada. That points to that this story is not focused on the literal interpretation of, okay, he was in the belly of this fish in this moment, and then every animal cried out to God, raised their hooves, and all this stuff. That's not the point. The point is more significant. The point is that you have all things scrambled. You have the righteous Israelite named Jonah, who ends up being defiant, reluctant, and prickly in a way. And then you have the wicked heathen Assyrians who all of a sudden are receptive, open, and willing. Jonah seeing this huge miracle happen in front of his eyes. It would be like all of the city of Dallas just coming together and saying, you know what, we need to be a part of the much loved movement. It would be unbelievable, right? Jonah sees this happen in front of his eyes. And what was his response? Jonah 4, verse 3, now, Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live and watch this. You see, he is so upset with God and what's happening, he wants to kill himself. None of the characters in this story are doing what we expected them to do, which is why we have to ask the question, like 2,000 years later or 3,000 years later, why are we still talking about this story? Why did it survive? It didn't survive because of a whale. It survived because this is a story about a man, a story about a nation, and a story about a word that none of us really actually want to talk about that much. And that's the whole point of the day, the story of forgiveness. You see, this is a story about, can Jonah forgive the Assyrians? Can Israel forgive the Assyrians? Jonah is so angry at God for being kind, for giving grace and love to the Assyrians, that it's infuriating. And you know what? It would be for us too. Think of your enemy. Think of the person that bullied you. Think of the people that have betrayed you in life. How excited are you for God to be kind to them? Yet, in the backdrop of this whole movement that Jonah is experiencing, this whole moment that Jonah's experiencing, there is the movement of the Israelite people back in Genesis, all the way back to Abraham. And listen to what God told them in Genesis 12, 2 and 3. I have plans to make a great people from your descendants. I'm going to put a special blessing on you and cause your reputation to grow so that you will be a blessing and an example to others. Through your descendants, all the families of the earth will find their blessing. In other words, Jonah, Israel, I've called you to be a light to the world, a living example of the redeeming, refreshing love and forgiveness of God. I've asked you to be an example of the forgiveness of God. So, Jonah, can you forgive your worst enemy and be a channel through which God's redeeming love and grace flows to them? Can you move forward from your past, or will your past determine your future? A question for Jonah, a question for Israel. And this is why the story of Jonah survives. And this is why the story of Jonah is not a romantic comedy made in Hollywood, because it doesn't tie up all in a bow and all cute and pretty. It actually ends with a guy considering suicide, asking God to kill him, and an entire nation being asked a question, and this individual representing an entire nation being asked a question, will you forgive them? Or could it be that your enemy is more receptive to love and forgiveness than you are? Should God have concern for Nineveh? You guys think about it. Should God have concern? Should he offer forgiveness and love to the Assyrians? Should he? You know, it's very easy when you watch the Cowboys play the Redskins, or you watch a soccer team play another soccer team, or you watch the Democrats go against the Republicans. It's easy to go, it's us and them. And in religion, organized religion has created this thing where it's us, the people that are righteous, and the people that sing praise songs, and the people that, read their Bibles. It's us, and the world is them. And then God enters the equation, Jonah's God, and says, no, it's not us and them, it's all of us. Everyone's invited. And in fact, I want all men, all women, all children to be saved. I want all men, all women, all children to experience forgiveness. I want all men, all women, all children who are broken and fragmented and hurt to feel full, to feel restored, to be redeemed. I want that for all men, all women, and all children. And it's so interesting because in a organized religion, it's tempting to go, I don't like a God like that. 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 I don't like I don't know that I want God inviting everybody. I want it to be us, and then they look bad because I look good. I do everything good and right and holy, and I read my Bible and I say my prayers, and they don't. So how do they get the same forgiveness and the same love and the same restoring that I get? You can tell that in this story, the tension is there. Like, Jonah is the guy that's saying, I am us, and I am so mad that God is for them. Jonah, I am a Democrat, and I am so mad that God loves the Republicans. Jonah, I am a Cowboys fan, and I'm so glad, I'm so mad that God loves the Redskins. I have a certain sexual preference, a certain sexual orientation, and I'm so mad that God is hanging out there with them. I raised my kid this way, and I'm so mad that God is willing to forgive and love and offer grace to that family who doesn't raise their kid the way I would. It's staggering, the tension. And all of a sudden, this profound, very personal, very pressing moment in Jonah's life goes beyond Jonah, and it goes to his Israelite nation, and it goes beyond them to the audience that reads this over the next thousands of years, all the way to us today. And it's very profound and very pressing and very personal to us. Because we come to this word forgiveness, this concept forgiveness, this reality forgiveness. We come, and here's what we say, here's what I say. I say I want to receive it, but I don't know if I want to give it. Because forgiveness, by definition, I'll give you a definition if you're taking notes. Note takers are history makers. Forgiveness equals releasing the debt they owe you for the pain they caused you. At the foundation of forgiveness is some type of pain. At the foundation of forgiveness is some type of betrayal, some type of something. And I'm knowing in my mind, because I live my own life and I'm pretty old, that all of us in here can relate to that type of moment. We've all been betrayed, hurt, somebody stabbed us in the back, something has happened, and forgiveness is saying, I'm going to release the debt that you owe me for the pain that you caused me. Now, I've got a saying up here on the screen. It's about to come up. It's about to, yes. All right. If you can see that, which all of you can, try to say that 3 times fast and go. 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. I'm struggling with it. 6, 6, hicks, nick, 6. Slick bricks with picks and sticks. Wow. Now I want you to repeat after me on this one. Forgive as God forgave. 3 times fast. Forgive as God forgave. Forgive as God forgave. Forgive as God forgave. One of those was really easy to say, but it's really hard to do. It's easy to say it, but man, when I think about letting all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from me, I don't know. When I think about those Assyrians, and I think about the Assyrians in our world right now, the Assyrians in West Dallas and in South Dallas that are taking advantage of kids, the Assyrians that are leading people into the wrong places, like, I am not excited about the Assyrians. Forgive as God forgave. Now, I do want to spin out for you. We're just going to focus on forgiveness, then we're done. I'm going to spin out for you what I believe forgiveness is and what I believe forgiveness is not, because I do think that we get confused at times in our world. Here you go. Forgiveness is not forgetting. So when I was in middle school, anybody play football in middle school? Okay, nobody. All right. Anyway, so I played football in middle school, and I was a defensive back. I was also a quarterback. That's interesting. But anyways, so I was a defensive back, and I was on a wide receiver, and they ran a play opposite of my side. So I'm just kind of trotting along. They run a play opposite of my side. They score a touchdown. The referee goes touchdown, and the audience, cheers, and the band starts playing. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a semi-truck hits me. Boom, and I'm just laying there in Touchdownville with stars in my eyes. Now, I remember that kid. His name is Parker. I didn't forget. That's like 30 years ago. When you get blindsided by life, when pain happens, dad says something to you, degrading, a friend that you thought was a friend calls you out just to make themselves look better in front of the friend group. Someone marginalizes you. You don't forget that. It's not about forgetting. Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about remembering your commitment to forgive. You see, it's not it's not if, it's when feelings of hurt, when moments of disappointment, when betrayal rises up in your life, that you don't, I'm not saying you're going to forget those moments. I'm saying that you're going to remember your commitment to forgive them, the debt that they owe you. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's also not condoning. Forgiveness is not condoning. When you forgive someone, it doesn't mean what they've done to you is right in any way or just in any way. I'm not saying that. If someone sends a rude text message about you or puts a rude tweet or Instagram or Facebook or name Snapchat, name your thing. If they do something rude and you forgive them, you don't then follow that up and say, hey, do that 10 more times so I can grow a little bit. No, there is none of that. All that it means when you forgive them is you no longer owe me for the pain that you caused me. Forgiveness, I think this is worth writing down and putting in somewhere, because it's not minimizing sin, it's maximizing the goodness of God. The goodness of God overcomes evil. That is exactly what Romans 12 says. It says, do not repay evil with evil, but overcome evil with good. It's the goodness of God that overcomes these divisions and horrible kind of injustices in our communities. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it's not condoning, and forgiveness is not reconciling. Don't think those two things are the same. Forgiveness doesn't automatically make every relationship, you have a dad or you have a friend that betrays you or whatever. It's not, that relationship is not automatically great and made whole because you forgive them. That's not the expectation. Forgiveness does, in a way, press a reset button. You get to start new, and that is good. I played, so I told you I've been doing some weddings lately. So I played golf with like the groomsmen. You've heard of this maybe. And so anyways, we're playing golf, and one of the guys gets up and he hits a shot and it goes straight right, like out of bounds. And he goes, mulligan! Does anybody know what a mulligan is in golf? It's a redo. It's a start over. I get to hit again. But does that guarantee that that shot is going to be great? Does that guarantee that he's a better golfer? No. I'll tell you why I know that. Because his next shot went straight left, out of bounds. Nobody was using either one of his shots. He was horrible in that moment. And I'm joking because I'm betting that he hears me say this. But anyways, he gets a mulligan to start over. And forgiveness gives people a mulligan, and that's a good thing. But you can forgive without reconciling. Just remember, you can't reconcile without forgiving. So forgiveness is an instant. It can be instantaneous. But building trust takes time. And so like for me, my wife and I don't know, almost 2 years ago now, we bought a house in Dallas, right? We bought a house here. We love it. We're in Oak Cliff. When you build a home, that takes time. Buying a house is like forgiveness. You do that, and it happened pretty quick. Actually, a lot quicker than I wanted it to, because like a lot of money went out of my account all at once. But I bought a house, but now my wife and I are building a home. That takes time. So, and I think sometimes in certain circles, reconciliation, or thinking that Jonah, let's go back to Jonah, and the Assyrians all of a sudden need to be best friends. Reconciliation, everybody's best friend, woo, party together. No. You know, the reality is that molestation happens in the city of Dallas way more than you want to know. That's why we don't want these kids out on the streets from 3 to 7. There's 100,000 kids, and that's why we are attacking that with all the power and might and movement that we can to get them into Trinity River Mission and others that are going to take care of these kids and give these kids a safe and meaningful environment so that they're not around those predators, right? But I would say this. I'm not asking everybody to reconcile. What I'm asking is I'm saying, okay, be willing to forgive. Okay, that's the start. And then God even goes one step further and says, when it's, Romans 12:18, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, because again, a lot of these predators and people in life and betrayers in life, they don't want to reconcile. They don't even want to talk. They don't want to interact. As far as it depends on you, Romans 12:18, live at peace with everyone. So there's forgiveness, peace, and then sometimes reconciliation is what God's called you to. It's what you pursue. But again, it takes two to tango, two to dance, and that may or may not happen. Boundaries are very important. We put boundaries around ourselves, around our kids, because that's very important. We don't have to be, just because you make peace doesn't mean you make partnership. Very different. Peace with people doesn't mean we're all best friends and hanging out on the weekends. I can be very peaceful with you behind bars. Because justice is you needed to be behind bars. That's consequences for your actions. I can make peace with you, though. I don't have to hang out with you. So, forgiveness is not forgetting, it's not condoning, it's not reconciling. I would say this, forgiveness is a cycle breaker. It is a cycle breaker. Ephesians 4:31 and 32, just that verse I referenced earlier. Get rid of all bitterness, anger, harsh words, slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, break the cycle. Be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. There is a cycle of unforgiveness. It looks like this. I think we have it. Betrayal that causes pain. Pain that becomes vengeful thoughts. Vengeful thoughts that go deeper into bitter roots. Resentment, which, if you know the where that word comes from, that word actually means to feel again. That means you play that tape over and over again. You resent it. It comes back over and over again. And then what ends up happening is the pain that got to you goes through you, and that pain doesn't transform you in a good way. It transfers to another person, to another situation. Just like Jonah. Jonah was in a moment where he felt pain and he went through all this. Can you see it in Jonah's life? But what did Jonah want to do? He wanted to take revenge. He wanted to betray them. He wanted to keep the cycle of unforgiveness going. It can either disrupt and transform us, or it can disrupt and transfer to others through us. And I would say this, nothing new is going to happen without forgiveness. So you're just going to keep this old cycle, this old pattern, and you're going to believe partial truths. Like the partial truth is something bad happened to you. The whole truth is, even though something bad happened to you, you can actually end up with good outcomes. You can make the community better through forgiveness. There is more wholeness through forgiveness than through revenge. That's the whole truth. I was a student pastor and for a long time, And I remember a 15-year-old guy that came to me and he said, my dad's been a drunk for a long time, and every time he gets drunk, he'll beat me, and then he'll scream at me, and he'll tell me that he wishes he never adopted me. And when he was 15 in that year, his dad died, and they never talked about it. They never got to address it. And I thought it was very interesting because he came up to me after a service once and he said, Pastor Hugh, this whole forgiveness thing, because it's something we got to talk about. He said, I get it. You know, Jesus forgives me. And because he forgives me, I can forgive others. And so I'm choosing to forgive my dad. And my dad's not here, and I can't tell him that. But I'm choosing to forgive him. And I told him, I looked at him, and I said, you have just changed the trajectory of generations. The type of husband, the type of dad, the type of grandfather that you will be is a completely different place than where you came from. This has broken a cycle and created a whole new one through forgiveness. It's a cycle breaker. Forgiveness, I like to say this, and I think I want to focus on the word sometimes. Sometimes the worst done to you brings out the best done through you. Okay? So like, there have been some pretty kind of, again, I'm not trying to compare my problems to anybody else's because we all have them, but I've had some pretty harsh things done to me. And it honestly could have caused me, and I was in suicide watch at one time in my life. I remember that. Much like Jonah. And in that moment, I remember having the opportunity to either lean into that or to start a new cycle, to start a new way, to become maybe a better version of myself. Maybe something great could happen through me because of something bad that happened to me. And I'm not saying I'm a great guy or anything, but I do think that better things have happened through me because of that. Now, forgiveness is a cycle breaker. It's also a gift. I'm guessing, how am I doing on time, guys? We good? Need to wrap? Need to wrap? Okay, I'm going along. All right. I am a preacher. Forgiveness is a gift to yourself. A lot of times forgiveness is more for you than for the other person because they don't necessarily want it. They don't necessarily think they even need it. But for you, I would just remind you, the longer you hold on to the hurt, the longer their actions have a negative effect on your life. So forgiving won't like change what happened to you in the past, but it can change what happens in the future. And so I would just tell you, you are locked inside of a prison if you're unforgiveness, but you have the key on the inside to unlock it and get out of it. And sometimes I just knew I needed to say this today, that some of us, the hardest person to forgive is ourselves. And so in case you may have never, there's 4 guys in the Bible that I would call a big deal. Like there's a lot of guys in the Bible I call a big deal. 4 guys I'll name. Moses, you may have heard of him. Moses, if he were standing here today, he would say, I murdered a man. David, who's like thought of as the greatest king of all time, outside of Jesus, would stand up here today and he would say, I committed adultery. Zacchaeus, who got to hang out with Jesus and have dinner and his life totally changed, he would say, I stole from people constantly. And Peter, one of Jesus' best friends, would stand up here today and say, I denied any affiliation to Jesus in Jesus' worst moment. Now, they all could have chosen not to forgive themselves. I don't know where you're at. I don't know what you're going through. You could choose not to forgive yourself. But all 4 of those guys changed history. And I guarantee you they took the step and gave themselves the gift of forgiving themselves. Forgiveness is also a revealer. it reveals your choice. Like, Jonah, what's your choice? Israel, what's your choice? You guys, what's your choice? Because when faced with betrayal, hard moments, you really have a choice, forgiveness or unforgiveness. It's right there in front of us. And I think that in our communities, to say that it's unneeded or unnecessary to have forgiveness, we would be missing the boat in a big way. Like, the city of Dallas doesn't need us to talk less about forgiveness. It needs us to embrace and actually have the voice of forgiveness in an everyday conversation in our lives, because that's what makes communities whole. You think our communities are divided? Probably. You think they're fragmented? Yes. Why? Forgiveness is not a part of the conversation. You see, the logic of being a victim, the logic of perpetrating, the logic of taking revenge, the logic of not forgiving is what rules the day. The illogic of love and forgiveness is what needs to rule. We have that choice. We get to choose it every day. Forgiveness. Over and over again, forgiveness. So I'll end with this. Will you say yes to God's love and forgiveness, knowing that he offers that same love and forgiveness to the person or the people that have wronged you? Will you be a channel through which God's redeeming love and forgiveness can flow to your family, friends, community, and even your enemies? This is one of the questions we got to struggle with. And I think the movement of our communities hinges on our answer. Can I pray for us right quick? And then Philip's going to come up and close us out. God, thank you so much for the people in this room. And thank you for Jonah and this story of forgiveness. And man, it really inspires me to think and to go, okay, what's my choice for my community, for my family, for my friends? Like, who am I going to be? Am I going to be a forgiver or an unforgiver? So, thank you for loving us and for forgiving us. And it is in Jesus' awesome name that we pray. Amen.